What's the wildest thing that happened when you turned 18? A woman stopped me in the school parking lot and said, "I'll pay you $40,000 if you come home with me." I froze. "Who are you?" "I'm your birth mom, and I want to reclaim you." My brain short-circuited. I'd been dreaming of this day ever since I was a child and never expected it to start with a bribery. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person," I said coldly before shoving past her and running for the school bus. That night, my phone buzzed with a notification from Venmo. $40,000 from Fiona Gold, my birth mom. The message read, "Tell your fake parents you hate them. Come home to your real family." I stared at the huge number. It was the exact amount I needed for college. That's when my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer until that same number sent me a text minutes later. "Rose, they bought you from me when I was 15. But in 3 months, you turn 18. You can choose to be with me. I don't understand what you want." "I want my daughter back." "Why no?" "Because you have 7 siblings, all in foster care. They ask about their big sister every day." My stomach dropped. "But if you come back, if you help me prove I can maintain a family unit, I can get them back." I hung up. At home, Mom was in the kitchen making my favorite lasagna. "How was school, sweetie?" I almost told her everything until Dad walked in exhausted from his second job and kissed my forehead. "Got some good overtime this month. NYU is looking more possible every day." The next morning at breakfast, I broke down. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." I showed them everything. Mom's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. "Oh gosh, not again." Again. Dad pulled out a filing cabinet from the hall closet. Inside were folders filled with legal documents and restraining orders against Fiona. "She tries to reconnect every few years," Mom whispered, tears streaming. "We've spent everything fighting her. We didn't want you to know. Didn't want you to feel like I wasn't worth fighting for." I finished. "Like you were being fought over." Dad corrected. My phone buzzed with another Venmo notification. $1,700 with the message, $100 for every year your parents stole. When I didn't respond, she followed up with, "Your real siblings need you. They cry for you. Be the sister they deserve." I screenshotted everything. That week, Fiona escalated. She sent CPS to our house with an anonymous tip about medical neglect. The Venmo offers increased to $50,000, then $60,000. That's when I realized what I had to do. I called Fiona back the next day. "I've been thinking about your offer." Her voice brightened immediately. "You have the money?" It would change everything. And those kids, my siblings, they deserve better than foster care. She laughed, relief flooding through the phone. I met Fiona at a coffee shop the next day where she coached me through fake tears. "Remember, you need to say they made you feel like a burden after the cancer you beat. That they threw the medical bills in your face. They would never. That's not the point. The judge needs to hear it." She introduced me to 3 witnesses she'd paid, including my dad's arranged brother who'd agreed to testify for $10,000. "He's going to say he saw them lock you in your room," Fiona explained casually. "And this woman will say she heard your mom call you ungrateful at the grocery store. Once I have you, all my other kids follow." That's 8 kids, Rose. Maximum government support, tax benefits, and the survivor benefits from your biological father's death. My blood went cold. "My father's dead." She waved her hand dismissively, sliding a document across the table. "Sign this. It says you want to explore reunification." I signed it. She had no idea my phone was recording in my pocket or that my parents' lawyer was receiving everything in real time. 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, we all walked into court. Fiona had coached me to sit away from my parents, to flinch when they tried to touch me. Fiona took the stand, tears streaming. "I just want my daughter back. I want her to know her real siblings before it's too late." Then the judge turned to me. "Rose, I'd like to hear from you." I stood up slowly, just like Fiona had coached me. "Your Honor, I have something to say." I pulled out my phone and Fiona's voice filled the room. "He's going to say he saw them lock you in your room. And this woman will say she heard your mom call you ungrateful at the grocery store." I even included everything she said about getting maximum benefits. The judge turned to Fiona. "Miss Gold, Where are your other children currently placed? Fiona's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. They're in temporary care. Where specifically? Fiona broke down, crying. They don't let me know. The system is broken, but Rose is almost 18. She can choose. That's when I stood up again. Your Honor, wait. My parents' faces went pale. Fiona made mistakes, but she was 15 when she had me. I want to give her a chance. The judge looked stunned. Are you saying you want to live with your biological mother? I avoided my parents' eyes. My siblings need their sister. Maybe we all deserve a second chance. I moved in with her that night. My parents tried to stop me, but I was almost 18. She fell asleep smiling, thinking she'd won. But I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of her roach-infested apartment because I knew I had to play the long game. The next morning, I woke up to Fiona banging pots in the kitchen, and she'd cleared one corner of the counter to make breakfast. She was humming and smiling bigger than I'd ever seen anyone smile at 6 o'clock in the morning. The eggs were burnt black on one side and runny on the other, and the toast had green spots that definitely weren't supposed to be there. She poured expired milk into a glass and set it in front of me with this proud look on her face. I forced myself to swallow each bite while watching a mouse run behind the stove. She kept talking about how happy she was to finally have her baby home and how we'd make up for lost time. My stomach turned, but I nodded and smiled back at her. When she went to shower, I grabbed my phone and typed out our agreed code to my parents. Just 2 words that meant everything was okay for now. And Mom sent back 3 heart emojis instantly. I knew she hadn't slept at all because the timestamp showed she'd been online all night. I took photos of everything in the apartment. The roaches crawling up the walls, the mold in the corners, the broken window held together with duct tape. My fingers moved fast as I emailed Derek every detail from the night before, attaching the photos and screenshots of Fiona's latest Venmo attempts. He wrote back within minutes telling me to keep documenting, but not to take any risks that might make her suspicious. At the school, I sat in math class staring at the same equation for 20 minutes without writing anything down. Hope Bailey noticed from across the hall during passing period and pulled me into her office. She didn't ask questions, just told me I could use her office anytime I needed quiet space or just wanted to sit. Her eyes said she knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't push until I was ready to talk. That afternoon, a woman named Leslie Kramer called and said the court had assigned her as my guardian ADM. She explained her job was to figure out what was actually best for me, not what either set of parents wanted. She scheduled meetings at both houses and mentioned she'd seen lots of cases where money became the real issue instead of the child. 2 days later, I was doing homework at Fiona's kitchen table when someone knocked hard on the door. Kelly Roy from CPS walked in with a clipboard and started taking photos before Fiona could even object. She documented the roaches scattering when she opened cabinets, the black mold growing in the bathroom, the locks that didn't work. Fiona kept making excuses about how she'd just moved in and was still fixing things up. Kelly's face stayed neutral, but I could tell she wasn't buying any of it as she wrote notes on her clipboard. That evening, Fiona grabbed for my phone while I was texting, saying we needed family privacy and my adoptive parents were probably tracking me. I'd already backed up everything to the cloud and had recording apps running in the background constantly. I handed it over without fighting and let her think she'd won this round. She went through my messages and deleted my parents' numbers, not knowing I had them memorized anyway. The next morning, the bank called about the Venmo transfers, explaining they had to report any gift over $15,000 to the IRS. The woman said this could mess up my financial aid applications for college if it counted as income. I called Derek right after, and he told me to freeze access to those funds immediately and document that they were bribes, not gifts. I spent an hour on the phone with Venmo support getting everything locked down while Fiona was at work. That same day, Alan posted on Facebook about how my adoptive parents bought a baby from a desperate teen mother. He tagged half the people in town and included old photos of my dad from when they were kids. I screenshotted everything before he deleted it an hour later, probably after sobering up or realizing he could get sued. The post had already been shared dozens of times and people were commenting asking if it was true. 3 days after that, my parents texted asking to meet at a coffee shop downtown where we could talk without breaking any court orders. They picked a place with outdoor seating so everything would be public and documented. Mom brought my favorite turkey sandwich and Dad had papers from Dererick about communication boundaries. We sat far enough apart that no one could say they were pressuring me or violating Fiona's space. They explained they couldn't visit or call directly because Fiona could claim harassment, so everything had to go through Dererick now. Mom's hands shook as she passed me the sandwich, and I could see she'd lost weight in just the few days since I'd left. Dad kept his voice steady, but his eyes were red and puffy like he'd been crying. We agreed on signals for emergencies and set up a schedule for checking in through the lawyer. They promised they'd keep fighting, but would follow every rule so Fiona couldn't use anything against them. I wanted to hug them, but knew someone might be watching or taking photos to use in court later. Instead, I just nodded and took small bites of the sandwich while we went over the plan. The whole meeting lasted 20 minutes before Dererick said we should wrap up to avoid any appearance of coordination against Fiona. 2 days later, Leslie showed up at Fiona's apartment for our scheduled interview. She sat across from me at the sticky kitchen table while Fiona pretended to clean dishes in the next room, but really listened to every word. Leslie asked why I'd chosen to move in, and I explained about wanting to know my siblings, keeping my voice steady while Fiona banged pots louder whenever I paused too long. Leslie wrote notes in her folder and watched how I kept glancing toward the kitchen, then asked if I felt safe here. I nodded quickly and said everything was fine, that I just needed time to adjust. She leaned forward and warned me about taking on too much responsibility for other people's problems. Her eyes stayed on mine longer than necessary before she packed up her papers and left. The next morning, I walked to the foster care agency office downtown and filled out 12 pages of paperwork requesting supervised visits with my siblings. The coordinator, Lina Rivers, went through each form carefully and explained that the process would take several weeks because of background checks and home studies. She showed me photos of the kids in their current placements, and I memorized their faces, especially Michelle, who had my same nose and chin. Lina said Michelle had been asking about her big sister for years, but no one knew where I was until now. I signed the final form, and she promised to call once the visits were approved. Back at the apartment, Fiona had arranged 2 chairs facing each other and told me we needed to rehearse for court. She demonstrated how to let tears fall without wiping them, how to make my voice catch at the right moments. She drilled me on phrases about feeling unwanted and like a burden, making me repeat them until they sounded convincing. My phone recorded everything from my pocket while she corrected my posture and taught me to flinch at certain words. We practiced for hours until she said I was ready. At the downtown library, I used the public computers to search for my biological father's death records. After nearly an hour of looking through different databases, I found the certificate showing he had died 2 years earlier than Fiona claimed, and from a car accident, not the illness she always described. The record listed no life insurance policies and showed outstanding medical debts. I snapped photos of the screen and sent them to Dererick with notes about the timeline discrepancies. The next day, Hope met with me in her office with a stack of financial aid appeal forms. She explained how to show that the Venmo transfers were coercion, not gifts, and helped me draft a statement about the bribery. We attached screenshots and legal documents showing Fiona's harassment. Hope had handled cases like this before and knew what the committee needed. She filed everything online while I watched and printed copies for me to keep. That night, Fiona handed me a thick packet of government benefit applications, already partially filled out. The forms listed 8 children living in our apartment, though it was just the 2 of us. She pointed where she wanted me to sign as an adult dependent and shoved the pen toward me. I told her I wanted to read everything first, then took the packet to my mattress. While she watched TV, I photographed every page, capturing her handwriting and false claims. By the time she came to snatch the papers back, I already had copies of it all. Later that afternoon, Kelly showed up at my adoptive parents' house, following up on yet another anonymous report about educational neglect. Mom texted me through Dererick that she'd shown Kelly my report cards, 4 years of A's and B's with perfect attendance. Kelly rolled her eyes and said this was the fourth false report in 2 months, all from the same phone number. She opened a formal investigation into harassment through false reporting. The courthouse status conference lasted an hour and a half, with everyone squeezed into a small room. The judge reviewed all the recent complaints and kept the current supervised arrangement, despite Fiona's lawyer pushing for immediate full custody. She ordered full home evaluations for both households in the coming month. Fiona's lawyer argued it wasn't necessary, but the judge cited CPS concerns about living conditions and the pattern of false reports. Fiona sat tight-lipped and furious as the judge set the next hearing for 6 weeks later. 3 days afterward, Lina called to say my first sibling visit had been approved and set up a video call with Michelle. I sat in the agency office staring at the laptop when a little girl with dark pigtails appeared. Michelle asked right away if I was really her sister and why I had never visited. Her foster mom sat beside her, rubbing her back as Michelle showed me stuffed animals and drawings. She'd drawn pictures of a big sister she'd never met, always with long hair like mine. I promised we'd meet in person soon, and she made me pinky swear through the screen. The call ended after 20 minutes when Michelle began to cry and asked why we couldn't live together. That Friday, Fiona invited one of her paid witnesses for dinner, a man who reeked of smoke and kept forgetting his lines. She coached him through the story about my dad yelling at me outside a grocery store, correcting details while I secretly recorded. Afterward, she was confident the judge would believe him. The next morning, Leslie sent me to a therapist she'd chosen. I spent 2 hours answering questions about moving between houses, recording Fiona's coaching, and living with roaches and broken locks. The therapist noted I was stressed, but using good judgment. When I got back, Fiona was furious. The courthouse clerk had rejected her emergency custody motion, telling her she needed a real lawyer and proper forms. That night, I got a credit alert. Someone had opened a $5,000 card in my name using Fiona's address. She denied it, blaming stress and paranoia, but I went to the police and filed an identity theft report. Later, Mom told me they'd found my adoption records, showing normal fees and signed consent, not Fiona's "they bought you" story. Dererick filed everything, and Leslie warned me Fiona might get desperate as the case turned against her. 2 days later, Fiona threatened to demand back all the Venmo money unless I cut off contact with my adoptive parents. I said I still needed them for college letters and that Dererick was handling the legal side. Kelly then called to say she was opening a formal case about the false CPS reports, explaining they were a crime. She gave me her direct number in case I ever felt unsafe. The next day, Hope pulled me aside at school and taught me how to prepare evidence properly, timestamps, backups, and witness notes. She gave me a notebook for court records. Meanwhile, Fiona was busy making calls and finally set up a meeting with a tax guy she said could get us more money. We went to a strip mall office where a man in a wrinkled shirt showed Fiona how to claim all 8 kids as dependents on her taxes. He admitted it was fraud since most of the kids were still in foster care, but joked the government rarely checked. Fiona paid him cash, took the forms, and left excited about the money. I stayed quiet, recorded everything, and sent it to Dererick. That night, I researched survivor benefits and found my biological father's obituary. He died in a motorcycle accident 6 years ago, unemployed, with no insurance or assets. Screenshots proved Fiona's story about survivor benefits was a lie. Over the next days, I organized all my evidence into folders: recordings, screenshots, fake reports, fraud, and photos, backing everything up on flash drives. One morning, Fiona caught me off guard, digging through my backpack and reading emails with Dererick. She screamed, trashed my room, and called me a traitor. I grabbed my laptop and phone and ran out while neighbors banged on the walls. After that, I stayed at school late every day. Hope let me use her office and left out snacks. Around 6, Mom would meet me in the parking lot with dinner, clothes, and toiletries, which I hid in my locker. By Thursday, the home evaluator came for the scheduled visit. Fiona had scrubbed the place spotless and even cooked a proper meal. Fiona dressed up the apartment for the home evaluator, but when he opened the cabinets, roaches scattered everywhere. He photographed the bugs and mouse droppings despite Fiona's excuses. That week, she bombarded me with texts swinging between love, threats, and forgiveness. I saved everything for Derek. The credit bureau confirmed the fraudulent card was removed, and I gave a formal statement to the detective. Lina called with good news. My sibling visit with Michelle was approved for Tuesday. In court, the judge ordered Fiona to attend parenting and financial classes before any custody changes. Fiona erupted and stormed out of the courtroom. Derek advised me to request modified arrangements, so I began splitting time between Fiona's and my adoptive parents' homes. Fiona grew angrier each time I left and eventually shook me, screaming I was ruining everything. Around the same time, Alan attacked me online, posting old photos with rants that strangers piled onto. I took screenshots, but didn't respond. Kelly reminded me to focus on safety, not investigations, and set up a code word system in case of danger. Soon after, Fiona received the evaluator's damning report showing roaches, mold, broken locks, and proof of paid witnesses. It recommended supervised visits only. Furious, Fiona destroyed the apartment, and I locked myself away. The next day at school, Fiona burst into the cafeteria, sobbing and grabbing my arm in front of everyone. The officer removed her and issued a trespass order, warning she'd be arrested if she returned.